it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. My neighbor has chosen this very moment to play the drums, so I might have to just like do this to the beat. He usually doesn't drum for very long, but I have to do this now. We are here because Clara and the Devil is coming out, and I am going on a very short West Coast tour to promote it. I am unfortunately not bringing little Kimura with me, although I have plans for a PowerPoint presentation, so hold on to your butts, as they say. It is beautiful. I will say that if you got an ARC, the ARC is not nearly as nice as the finished copy, but of course it's nice to have, very exclusive. It's really beautiful, and like all the finishing, it's just wonderful. It's such a beautiful art piece. I think, you know, if you watch these videos, you've been hearing me talk about Clara and the Devil for literal years. I wrote it for Calabrina / Stacey Turner's birthday in 2018, 19. So like, we've been here a while, and Little Kimura and I have been working together for 10 years as of this April. So that's a really big deal, and I'm really, really honored to be able to go on the road to, you know, talk about it with those of you who want to join me. On Monday, May 4th, it's at Skylight with Tina Horn, which is a very inspired pairing, actually. Right now I'm reading Why Do People Like That, which is very fun. Tuesday, I will be in Portland with Lindsay Straube, which I'm very excited about. It'll be good to see Lindsay again. We met at Comic-Con last year. Then Wednesday, it's Seattle with my good friend Isabel Cañas, who obviously you should know if you're a person of taste. And on Thursday, this will be an if you know, you know kind of thing. I will be doing an event in Sacramento with Julie Soto. So I wonder what we'll talk about. And then also, in case you missed it, the paperback of Gifted and Talented is now available. She is thick. It is not a floppy paperback, but you know, I really feel quite strongly about this book. I love this book a lot. I think of Masters of Death is like the ensemble story where I think about the characters a lot. Gifted and Talented is one of those. Like, I really associate it with Gifted and Talented and Masters of Death are very associated in my head, where they're both kind of about like how to live and all these people who are making terrible decisions. I'm also doing, I think this will be up prior to me doing an event with TJ Klune on on Saturday, May 2nd. It's a Sunny's Bookshop event. Sunny's Bookshop is in Tarzana, but the event is, I think, on UCLA's campus. But more information is like elsewhere. So we're talking about TJ's book, We Burned So Bright, which is a real tearjerker. It's very sad. It's very sad. I mean, it's about grief in a lot of different ways. It's fortunately quite short. So like, I think it's like you could read it in one sitting and experience like a lot of feelings. I know that I read a lot of like grief-driven books during the pandemic. Sometimes you just like need to read about something so that you can feel stuff, or maybe that's just me. I don't have any water sign placements. So yeah, I cried at the end, and even as I was telling other people about it, I started crying again. I have no idea what TJ and I are going to talk about, so like, wish me luck. Okay, so here's a few questions. Someone asked me, how do you deal with getting writer's block in the middle of writing a work in progress that you're extremely passionate about? This is one that I answered quite quickly. That's like, if you don't know how to move forward in your draft, it's because you've already done something. It's because of a decision you've already made. If you don't know how to move forward, it's because something is not right with what you have planned to do, what you have already done. It usually means there need to be some cuts or some changes in order to move forward. I think it's actually like, and you're more able, I think, to identify this the more books you write, or the more you write generally, this feeling of like, I'm not blocked, I just can't find a specific route forward, and it's because of something that's behind me. That has proven pretty true for me all the time. And like, a lot of times it is like, writer's block usually has very little to do, in my opinion, with the actual story or the work itself. It usually is something to do with something else in your life, some other psychological imperative. But if it is something that's like, I just don't know how to move forward, then it is the plot. Then it's something that's like, that's not right because of something you just did. How do you tend to deal with a reader's slump as a writer? The only times that I find myself in reading slumps are usually when like I have to read things, or I feel that I have to read things. In my case, I do have to, like for blurbs and stuff. And it's like, well, this is just not what I want to read right now. I would never blurb a book that I didn't really like, or didn't feel strongly that people who like my work would also really like. But there are just times, you know, sometimes you just want to read something else. And so that can be a problem. Usually I have to just allow myself to read the thing that I want to read. Sometimes it's just a question of like, what do I want in this moment? What am I craving? And I think identifying that and then just giving it to myself helps. Reading shorter works or reading other mediums like plays, I think that's another way to just like remind yourself the joy of being able to immerse in a work. I mean, I really think there's nothing quite like the feeling of reading, but it definitely is true that sometimes like the news is so terrible that you're like, I just need to doom scroll in this moment, or I need to dissociate from the stresses of my life, and reading doesn't really allow you to do that. Reading is very interior, and I think you have to be able to sit comfortably in your interior life. But a shorter work, I think, can sometimes help. Or just reading the thing you want to read, just being honest about what that is. How to focus on one particular project while having a billion other ideas making their way into your mind. When I have met multiple ideas, I just start them. I just start writing them. And typically one idea like catches fire more so than the others. Like at no point do I ever feel like each idea there's always one idea that's strongest. This is, of course, this advice is contingent on, have you finished a book before? Or have you finished, fully executed an idea before? Because if you have never finished something, then you don't yet have the endurance to finish it. Like you have to train to be able to finish, which means that sometimes you're just like, I just have to finish this thing because I have never done it before and I don't know what it feels like to finish a manuscript. But if you have written things before and you're literally just like, okay, well, I know how to do this, I just don't know which of these ideas I like the most, which is true for me, then it's like, I will start all of them. I don't typically have more than 3 like strong fleshed out ideas at a time. And then I write the one that is strongest, like the one that is speaking to me the clearest. But I think it's fine to just get started and see which one speaks to you. I was wondering how the whole audiobook narration process works. Do you have any say in who narrates your work, and have you considered doing so yourself? Actually, what's funny about this ask is they start with saying they love Alone with You in the Ether, which is an audiobook that I am featured on. I've never narrated a full book, but that's just because of like time. It takes a lot of time. I did consider narrating Gifted and Talented, but it was just going to be so many hours of work and I couldn't do it because I only have so many hours in the day because my son is still very young and he only does a half day at school. So I just literally did not have the time. But also Eunice Wong did the narration for Gifted and Talented, and she did a much better job than I could have done. But yes, so I think that I have a little bit more say in audiobooks than other people because I continue to work with the same producer. I work with Steve Wagner at Macmillan Audio, and he produces all of my audiobooks. So Steve and I have a very good rapport. We really understand the way the other person works. I tend to tell him like the tonality of what I want from the narrator. I let him know if they should be of any particular, ethnicity or background or whatever. He gets the auditions, brings them to me. Sometimes I have specific people in mind. Like for Dreamland, for example, the narrator, Anya, is a young Filipina actress. And so I specifically asked for Fidel Capistrano and Alex Palting to narrate because both have done work for me before. Alex Palting did an incredible job in January's. She also does Belen in the Atlas series. Fidel did the whole narrator. Fidel was the single narrator for One for My Enemy. So these are actors whose work I already really love, who really understand my work, and it was just like Alex is also the voice of Vi in 12th Night. But so this time I got to have them sort of, the way that they do it is like they're given essentially a monologue and they perform it, but they haven't read the whole book yet. And so this time I went to Fidel because Fidel like really, really understood Anya's character. She had it like exactly right. And it was very clear to me that she was the right actor for it. So a lot of times that happens where it's like it's someone that I have in mind. Other narrators I bring back a lot are Steve West, who did Callum, and David Monteith, who voiced Tristan, Stephanie Namath Parker, who does a couple of the stories in January's, and she was Aleph in the Atlas series. Daniel Henning has a really strong grasp of humor, as does David Monteith, so I bring them back a lot. It's really an honor to me when people want to work on my books again. I mean, it's wonderful to hear, especially the people who really seem to like understand how to hit the notes that I'm trying to hit. And Eunice Wong, of course, and Gifted and Talented, incredible work. And then every now and then I work with someone new where I get a bunch of auditions and I just choose based on what I think the character sounds like. Often mine are narrated by an ensemble cast just because I write with ensemble casts. But yeah, so I do get a say, but once production has started, then I'm not like there for production. What have I read? I read The House in January's. I read the narrator part and the acknowledgments and Alone with You in the Ether. And I would certainly read things in the future. I don't see myself as added value. I think that like an actual professional voice actor, like, 9 times out of 10 is going to do a better job than me. So yeah, I think the other thing that I'm hoping to be able to voice myself is the introduction to the Best American Sci-Fi and Fantasy, which I guest edited. So it's my introduction, and obviously I would like to be the one to read those words, but we'll see. I was wondering if you had any advice for not letting life and responsibility steal your love for writing, if you had any advice for falling back in love with writing. I mean, I think this is a longer question that I'm going to give a relatively short answer to because I kind of think it's the same answer as the question about the reading slump. I think you just have to remember, like, writing is something you love, reading is something you love. And if you're not loving it, then why are you doing it, right? In any given moment, there's so many things, right, competing for our attention that you have the choice of how you spend your time. And especially for writing, something that, like, is not always hugely rewarding, especially if you're trying to do it to get published, you want to love what you're working on. And so I think sometimes that's just like, what do you want to do in this moment? What do you want to create? And for me, this doesn't happen to me very often because I'm almost always really in love with whatever I'm working on. People always ask me, what's your favorite book? And the answer is whatever I'm working on now. Like, I'm always really in love with the thing that I'm still shaping and the thing that's new and exciting. So I think for me, if you're not loving what you're doing, that could be a sign that it's just not the right thing to work on. It might be worth doing something else, doing a smaller project, taking a break, deciding like what would make you love it more. Sometimes it's just like, what do I want to write in this moment? This is what makes Masters of Death such an unusual book, even now looking back on it. Because every day, it was my first book after writing just fan fiction. And so when I sat down and I was just like, what do I want to write today? I did that. And so the book has a lot of different like fingerprints of what did I want to be in that moment? What kind of style did I want to have? It's this very interesting, like, I always say it's the work of an amateur, but in a good way. I mean, there are some mistakes you can only make when you're an amateur, that like it's being done for passion, it's being done for love, and it maybe isn't technically correct, but it's powerful because you can feel that love in it. So yeah, I think, the arts are something that we do to make us feel alive, not to make us feel like we're laboring, even though it is a labor and a craft. It's something that we do because we're in touch with this very human part of ourselves. And so I think that you should always be asking yourself, if you don't love what you're working on, what's wrong? What would make you love it? What do you love? What do you care about in this moment? I always want to write the thing that I'm thinking about. The reason that the project that I'm working on is always so precious to me is because it's like, it's undiscovered, and it's the thing where my head lives in this moment. It's what I'm thinking about right now. So yeah, I think you should write the thing that is like stuck in your head, whatever that is. So I'm editing this video right now, and there is jackhammering, which is super cool.
But basically, one thing that I forgot to say when I was originally recording my response to this is that I live and die by a 10-minute timer. I've brought this up before, but especially if it's something where it's like I can't find the time to write, you can find 10 minutes in your day. You can find 10 minutes to sit down and write something. And if that's all you get, then you tell yourself, okay, I did it. I did my 10 minutes, job done. And I will say that, like, I wrote a manuscript last year with 10 minutes a day, just doing like super small increments. And it did happen. If I have problems in revision, that's a separate issue. But the point is that, like, manuscripts are finite. You will reach the end. But also there's a good likelihood that once you get started and you stop making excuses for like, oh, but I have to do this and I have to do this, then you might just continue, and you might find that in that moment you can get a lot done. And I think that's worth it. So that's my recommendation. If the problem is like, I'm busy, if the problem is I'm uninspired, I think that is potentially a separate thing, but you would be surprised. 10-minute timer could change your life.
This ask is very, it's just a lot of compliments. And it says, I also really admire the fact that you don't let genre expectations or seemingly reader expectations stop you from creating a story you want to create. That's really funny. It's true. I'm physically incapable of pandering. I always think about how I would like to. Like, on some level, I think, especially being in publishing, it's funny because people always say that, you know, certain genres or whatever, it's just like, oh, you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And I am like, I wish I could do that. I wish I could just deliver the same book, in the sense that, like, every time you'd pick up a book of mine, you would have the same sort of feeling. Like, Emily Henry is very good at this. You pick up an Emily Henry book, and I would argue it's always an Emily Henry book, you know? And I don't know that I create that same feeling, which is very detrimental to my career, in the sense that it's very unclear how to sell my books, or because they're very different, we don't know. Someone who liked one might not like another one, and I would love to have a consistent demographic, but I simply cannot. Is it hard for you to not cave under pressure? Do you just not concern yourself with those kinds of things? I would say that when I sit down to write something, I don't care. In the moment, I'm just going to write what I'm going to write, and the way that the story is coming to me is how it's going to happen, and I don't have a lot of control over it. So on the one hand, no, I don't concern myself with those things. But also when I'm in between projects and I'm like, what if I did do this? Or like, if I'm trying to sell this project, like, what if I did consider what the next person would want to read? Can I be strategic about these choices? And so in those moments, I am concerned. But I'm also just not capable of, like, repeating myself. I honestly would like to. I would like to have a consistency to my work that would make it so that people knew what they were getting when they picked up something by me. I certainly appreciate that in a lot of authors, but it isn't to be. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. Oh, they also asked, how do you keep getting better? And I don't know. I try. I try to do new things and different things. And every time I have those moments where I realize, like, well, I can't just write the same book over. I can't, like, create the same feeling. For people who really love Masters of Death, why can't I just write more Masters of Death? Or people who really love the Atlas 6 but didn't necessarily love the follow-ups. Like, what is that I gave them? Like, why can't I do it again? I don't know. And so in the answering myself of I don't know, I just have to tell myself, well, let's do something weirder. Let's do something more complicated. Let's do something we haven't done before. Let's push this particular skill or this weakness. Let's try to, the book I'm working on right now, I'm trying to push the world building and the pace to something that feels like more of an action and adventure, fantasy, sci-fi, something that I haven't done in a while. And it is stressful. It is the hardest book I've had to write in a long time, but that's by design. So hopefully it works out. This is a spoiler, so just skip this, move along, just leave, I guess. While the Atlas series was releasing, I thought for sure the end might culminate in Libby burning down the archives, mirroring the original Alexandria burning. I understand that would probably have been too girl boss, defeating the entire point you made with her character, and I love the ending. But was that ever a thought in your mind? Libby would never have been the one to burn down the archives, because Libby's weakness, like the source of Libby's corruption arc, is that Libby is a little bit too concerned with the status quo. I mean, I think that her desire to be accepted and her desire to prove herself according to the status quo. I mean, it's Libby and Sloane from Girl Dinner are very similar characters. That it's just like, they're these characters who feel underappreciated, but they're still fighting for recognition by a metric that is never going to work for them. Or like it creates situations in which the only choice they can make is a corrupt one. So if anyone was going to burn down the archives, it would not have been Libby. It would have been Parisa. It could have been Gideon. There are lots of characters who could have done things like that, but the story that I was trying to tell, the underlying theme, is that like people are not that keen to burn down infrastructures of power. They're kind of more keen to have that power. But we also don't really know yet what choice Libby's going to make. I mean, the whole series ends on this, like, it ends with the same feeling as in oh my god, what is that? In Inception, with the spinning coin, is it? Yeah, the spinning coin, and you don't know which way it's going to land. That's the feeling, is we don't really know who Libby is going to be, what she's going to decide. Does she close the book or doesn't she? Does she remain fixated on this sort of kind of egotistical thing, and she can't really move forward because she still needs to have this sort of like, she needs her narrative to mean something. And she has not determined yet what kind of person that's going to make her. I was very cognizant of Libby being quite young, all the characters being quite young and sort of unfinished. And that's why the Atlas series has this implication of a multiverse where all things can be true, where all outcomes are possible. There is probably a version where one of the characters, Tristan is also a very viable option, one of those characters burns down the archives. And I think that the feeling that we're sort of slouching towards the inevitable of the archives being meaningless and destroyed, that's the feeling that to me is that feeling of like, that's the mirror between their world and our world. And like, when are we going to be ready to let go of these systems that identify power and who hold it for the few? So that would not, I mean, had that happened, it would not have been narratively consistent with the theme that I was trying to write. So, Clara and the Devil, come see me on the road. This has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next time.